Ladies and gentlemen, you ever notice how anger feels good in the moment, but then leaves you drained, guilty, or even embarrassed? Here's the truth. Anger isn't the real problem. It's just the signal. The real problem is how we respond to that signal. Today, I'll show you how to turn that signal into power so you can walk away from anger without losing your cool, your relationships, or your peace. The biggest mistake people make when they get angry, they assume they have no choice. Like it just takes over and the only thing left to do is lash out, yell, or shut down. But that's not actually true. Anger isn't a command, it's a suggestion. And here's the good news. Suggestions can be ignored. The most powerful move you can make in that moment is something so simple that most people overlook it. It's the pause. Now, when I say pause, I don't mean the kind where you grit your teeth, cross your arms, and steam until the anger boils over. Anyway, I'm talking about a pause that buys you time, that creates space between what just happened and what you're about to do. Because in that space is where your real power lies. The space between the trigger and your reaction. Think about it. If someone cuts you off in traffic, your body's instinct is to slam the horn, shout things you wouldn't say in front of your grandma, and maybe ride their bumper just to prove a point. That's reaction. But if you pause even just for a second, you give yourself the chance to decide, is this really worth it? Do I want to carry this with me for the next 10 miles? 99 times out of 100, the answer is no. That pause doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you passive. It makes you in control. Because the truth is, anyone can get angry. That's easy. It takes no skill. But the one who pauses, the one who steps back for just a breath, that's the one who's actually steering the wheel of their life. And here's where it gets practical. You can train yourself to pause. It doesn't have to be complicated. One of the simplest techniques is to use your breath as a circuit breaker. Next time you feel the heat rising in your chest, take a slow inhale, hold it for a beat, then let it out. That single act can interrupt the pattern of anger long enough to shift from reaction to choice. You don't need a 10-minute meditation session. You need 3 seconds of ownership. Let me give you another angle. Imagine you're in a heated conversation with someone you care about. They say something sharp, something that cuts right to the bone. Your instinct is to fire back, to defend yourself, to match their volume with your own. But the pause, just one heartbeat where you hold your tongue, changes everything. It gives you the clarity to ask yourself, do I want to add gasoline to this fire or do I want to cool it down? That one question alone can save relationships. And here's the thing, the pause doesn't just help you in the moment. Over time, it rewires how you deal with anger altogether. Every time you choose to pause, you're building a new habit, a new reflex. Instead of anger being your default setting, calm becomes your baseline. You start catching yourself earlier. The things that used to set you off suddenly don't have the same grip. You're not stuffing your anger down. You're mastering it. Now, some people hear this and think, but won't pausing make me a pushover? Won't I just let people walk all over me? No. Pausing doesn't mean you ignore what's wrong or let someone disrespect you. It means you respond on your terms instead of theirs. It's like being the adult in the room. Kids throw tantrums. Adults hold the pause button until they know the right play. And when you respond after pausing, your words land differently. They carry weight because they're not born out of heat. They're born out of strength. I'll be honest with you, the pause isn't always comfortable. In fact, it can feel unnatural at first, like you're holding back when you just want to let it rip. But what feels unnatural at first eventually feels freeing, because that pause means you no longer get dragged into every fight, every argument, every pointless back and forth. You get to decide which battles are worth fighting and which ones aren't. And trust me, most of them aren't. So the next time anger knocks on your door, don't rush to answer it. Just pause even for a breath, even for a moment, because in that pause, you don't lose your power. You finally take it back. That's how you start never getting angry again. Here's something most people don't realize. Anger is usually just the mask. It's what shows up on the outside, but it's rarely the real thing happening underneath. And until you learn to name what's underneath, you'll keep getting stuck in the same cycle, blowing up, cooling down, and then wondering why you reacted that way in the first place. The truth is, anger is the bodyguard for other emotions. It stands in front loud and intimidating to protect what's actually going on inside. Think about the last time you got angry. Was it really anger you were feeling? Or was it disappointment? Maybe you felt disrespected. Maybe you were hurt or you were afraid of being misunderstood. But instead of admitting those emotions, which can feel vulnerable or even weak, we let anger step forward and do the talking. The problem is anger doesn't communicate clearly. It shouts, it pushes, it slams doors. And when we let anger be the messenger, people don't hear the truth of what we feel. They just hear the noise. That's why naming what's really happening is such a game changer. It sounds simple, but it's powerful. Because the moment you call an emotion by its real name, you shrink its control over you. You take it out of the shadows and put it in the light. It's the difference between saying, "I'm so mad at you right now," and saying, "I feel overlooked." Which one do you think opens the door to a better conversation? Which one is easier for the other person to actually hear? Now, I know this isn't easy. When you're heated, the last thing your brain wants to do is pause and search for vocabulary. Anger feels fast, immediate, like it demands an outlet right now. But here's the truth. Naming emotions doesn't take long. It just takes honesty. You don't need a psychology degree to do this. You just need to stop for a moment and ask yourself, what am I really feeling right now? What's under this anger? That little check-in with yourself can change the entire outcome of a situation. Here's an example. Let's say your coworker interrupts you in a meeting. The surge you feel, that's anger. But if you dig a little deeper, maybe you realize what you're actually feeling is disrespected, or maybe even embarrassed, because people didn't get to hear your full thought. Now, if you just lash out in anger, you might snap back and then the whole room feels the tension. But if you can name it, I felt cut off just now, and I'd like to finish my point. Suddenly, you've turned an angry outburst into a calm boundary. The difference is night and day. This doesn't just apply to work, it's even bigger in personal relationships. Anger tells your spouse, you never listen. But what you might actually mean is, I feel unimportant when I'm talking, and the phone takes priority. Anger tells your kid, you're driving me crazy. But what you might really mean is, I feel scared when you ignore the rules because I want you safe. The second version is vulnerable. Yes, but vulnerability is where connection lies. When you name what's real, you're not only calming yourself down, you're giving the other person a chance to meet you where you truly are. And here's something powerful. The brain actually calms down when you label emotion. Studies show that when you put feelings into words, the part of your brain responsible for survival mode reactions starts to quiet down. It's like hitting a release valve. The storm loses some of its force just by being acknowledged. You don't need to solve everything in that moment. Just naming it gives you back clarity and balance. Now, don't confuse naming your emotions with excusing someone else's behavior. Saying, I feel hurt, doesn't mean what the other person did was okay. It means you're communicating the truth instead of hiding behind anger. And that truth sets you up to respond with strength instead of just reacting with volume. This takes practice. At first, it might feel awkward, even clumsy. You'll catch yourself after the fact thinking, man, I wasn't really angry. I was embarrassed. But the more you practice, the faster you'll catch it in the moment. And eventually, instead of letting anger grab the microphone, you'll step in with the real words. That's how you start breaking the cycle, because anger isn't the enemy. Mislabbing it is. Once you start naming what's really happening, you don't just manage anger, you move past it. That's how you start never getting angry again. Here's the thing about anger. Most of us think if we raise our voice, if we get louder, people will finally get it. They'll finally understand how serious we are. But the reality is the louder we get, the less people actually listen, because volume doesn't equal influence. It usually just equals noise. And here's what I've learned. When you lower your volume, you raise your influence. Calm isn't weakness. Calm is power. Think about the last time someone yelled at you. Did you stop and carefully consider their words? Or did your brain just go into defense mode? When voices get loud, walls go up. People stop listening to what's being said and start preparing their counterattack. But when someone speaks calmly, even in a heated moment, it cuts through the noise like nothing else. Because calm is unexpected. Calm makes people lean in. I'll give you an example. Imagine two parents are correcting their teenager. Parent one is red in the face, voice booming, finger pointing. Parent two is calm, measured, voice steady. Both are serious. But who do you think that teenager is actually absorbing? The one who feels in control, the one who isn't trying to outshout the chaos, but is anchored in calm. That's influence. The same thing happens at work. Let's say your team drops the ball on a project. You could storm into the meeting, slam your hands on the table, and make it crystal clear you're angry. Or you could walk in, sit down, and in a steady voice say, "This didn't meet the mark, and here's why it matters." The first approach sparks fear, maybe compliance, but not respect. The second approach earns attention, and more importantly, it earns buy-in. Because when you stay calm, people feel safe enough to listen and adjust. Now, I get it. Staying calm when you feel like exploding doesn't come naturally. Anger feels powerful in the moment. It feels like energy, like you're taking control. But if you step back, you'll realize anger isn't giving you control. It's taking it. When you yell, you hand over the reins. Your emotions are driving the car, and you're just along for the ride. Calm is the opposite. Calm says, "I'm still the one steering here." And that is real power. Here's a practical way to start. Match your tone to the outcome you want. If your goal is to be heard, to actually land your point, then ask yourself, what tone of voice would make me listen if I were on the other side? It's never shouting. It's steady, even clear. That tone carries weight because people sense you're not ruled by the moment. You're anchored beyond it. Another way to think about it is like music. If every instrument is blasting at full volume, the song is just noise. But when one instrument softens, it creates space for the melody to stand out. Your voice works the same way. When everyone else is escalating and you lower your volume, you become the melody in the middle of the noise. People notice. People listen. This doesn't mean you never show emotion. It doesn't mean you have to sound robotic or detached. It just means you channel it in a way that makes people hear you instead of tune you out, because calm doesn't erase passion. It amplifies it. Calm gives your words gravity. Now, I know some people worry, but if I stay calm, won't people think I'm not serious? No, in fact, it's the opposite. Think about the people you respect most. The boss, the mentor, the teacher, the coach who never had to raise their voice, but when they spoke, everyone leaned in. That's what calm does. It commands respect without demanding it. And the more you practice it, the easier it gets. The first few times you try lowering your voice in a heated moment, it might feel unnatural, maybe even forced. But over time, it becomes your new normal. And suddenly, arguments that used to spiral out of control now end faster with less damage because you never let the fire spread. Lowering your volume doesn't just change how others respond to you. It changes how you feel about yourself. You walk away from conversations knowing you didn't lose it. You didn't say something you regret. You didn't give anger the win. You walk away knowing you kept your influence intact, and influence, that's way more valuable than temporary release. So the next time you feel your voice rising, try the opposite. Lower it. Because calm doesn't just quiet the room, it fills it with power that anger could never give you. That's how you start never getting angry again. When anger shows up, the first instinct is almost always attack mode. We point the finger, we raise our voice, we fire off questions that sound more like accusations. Why would you do that? What were you thinking? How could you say that to me? And what happens? The other person immediately throws their guard up. They stop hearing us because all they feel is the attack. The conversation turns into a battle, and nothing gets solved. That's the trap of anger. It makes us believe attacking will fix the problem, when in reality, it just builds a bigger wall between us and the other person. There's another way, though. Instead of attacking, shift into curiosity. Curiosity doesn't mean you agree with what happened, or you're letting someone off the hook. It means you're trying to understand before you react. It's not about excusing behavior. It's about creating a pathway to clarity. Because 9 times out of 10, what triggered your anger isn't the full story. And if you stay in attack mode, you never get to see that story. Let me give you an example. Imagine a friend cancels plans with you last minute. Instinct says attack. You never follow through. You don't care about this friendship, but curiosity says, hey, I noticed you canceled. Is everything okay? Those two approaches feel completely different. The first one escalates. The second one opens the door to connection. Maybe they had something heavy going on they didn't tell you about. Maybe they were overwhelmed. You don't find that out unless you ask with curiosity. The same goes for work. Let's say a coworker drops the ball on a task that mattered to you. Attack mode sounds like, do you even take this seriously? Curiosity sounds like, I noticed this didn't get done. Help me understand what happened. Now, that coworker might still have made a mistake, but instead of shutting down or getting defensive, they're far more likely to give you the real answer if they feel like you're seeking to understand, not to shame. And once you know the real answer, you can actually fix the problem instead of circling around it in anger. What makes curiosity so powerful is that it disarms. People expect attack when you're upset. They're bracing for it. But when you come in with curiosity instead, it throws them off in a good way. It creates space for dialogue instead of debate. And here's the beautiful part. Even if you don't like their answer, even if you still disagree, you're in a much calmer state to respond because curiosity shifts your focus from I'm right, you're wrong to I want to understand what's really happening here. That shift alone keeps anger from running the show. Now, let's be honest, choosing curiosity in the heat of the moment isn't easy. It requires swallowing your pride for a second. It requires slowing down when everything in you wants to speed up. But it doesn't mean letting someone walk all over you. You can still be firm. You can still hold boundaries. You're just doing it in a way that actually gets heard. Curiosity is not weakness. It's strategy. And here's another benefit. When you shift from attack to curiosity, you actually discover more about yourself. Sometimes when you ask, why did this upset me so much? The answer has less to do with the other person and more to do with something inside you. Maybe that comment hurt because it touched on an insecurity. Maybe that action stung because it reminded you of a past experience. When you approach your own emotions with curiosity, you grow. You gain insight instead of staying stuck in reaction. Think about the relationships that matter most to you. Your family, your friends, your team. Those connections thrive not because everyone gets it right all the time, but because there's room for understanding when things go wrong. If every mistake or disagreement is met with attack, the relationship eventually breaks down. But if you build a habit of asking, help me understand, you protect the connection while still addressing the issue. That's how relationships last. At the end of the day, attack mode feels good for about 5 seconds. It gives you that little hit of satisfaction. Like you've proven your point, but it rarely gets you what you actually want. Curiosity, on the other hand, might not give you that quick release, but it gives you something much better. Resolution, clarity, and peace. And that's the goal, right? Not just to win the moment, but to win the bigger picture, your calm, your influence, your relationships. So the next time anger tempts you to attack, pause and ask instead. Trade the finger pointing for a question. Shift from why would you do that to help me understand what you meant. You'll be surprised how fast the fire dies down when curiosity takes the lead. That's how you start. Never getting angry again. One of the biggest traps anger sets for us is convincing us that our ego is worth more than our peace. Anger whispers. Don't let them disrespect you. Don't let them win. Don't let them get the last word. And when we buy into that, we sacrifice something much bigger. Because in chasing the need to protect our ego, we end up losing the very thing we claim to want, our calm. Think about it. How many times have you walked away from an argument where you won the point, but still felt terrible afterward? Maybe you had the sharper comeback. Maybe you proved the other person wrong, but later you're lying in bed replaying the whole thing. Your heart's still racing. Your mind's still restless. That's because winning the moment isn't the same as keeping your peace. And in the long run, peace is worth more. Here's the truth. Your ego is loud, but it's fragile. It demands to be defended at every slight. Every criticism, every little thing that feels like disrespect. Your peace, on the other hand, is quiet but strong. It doesn't need defending. It just needs protecting. And the way you protect it is by choosing it over your ego in moments of anger. Picture this. Someone cuts in front of you in line. Your ego screams, call them out, embarrass them. Let everyone see. They can't treat you like that. But your peace says, is this really worth handing over my calm for? Do I really want to carry this home with me? And 9 times out of 10, it's not. Protecting your peace means deciding some battles are too small to fight. Not because you're weak, but because you're wise enough to know what's worth your energy. This shows up in relationships too. Maybe your partner makes a snide comment, or your sibling says something that rubs you the wrong way. Your ego wants to clap back instantly. But protecting your peace means asking yourself, do I need to win this moment, or do I want to protect the bigger picture of this relationship? Because most of the time, it's not about the little jab, it's about the connection. And keeping the connection safe is more valuable than scoring a point. Now, let me be clear. Protecting your peace doesn't mean being a doormat. It doesn't mean you let people mistreat you. Boundaries are part of peace, too. The difference is how you enforce them. When your ego takes charge, boundaries come out sharp, loud, fueled by anger. When your peace takes charge, boundaries come out calm, firm, steady. The message is the same, but the delivery changes everything. One escalates, the other diffuses. One drains you, the other strengthens you. Protecting your peace also means letting go of the need to have the last word. How many arguments keep going? Not because there's more to say, but because both people are chasing the last punchline. That's ego talking. Peace doesn't need the last word because peace already feels secure. Peace is okay walking away knowing you kept your dignity even if the other person never admitted you were right. And that right there is a kind of freedom anger will never give you. Here's the challenge. In the heat of the moment, your ego feels urgent. It demands action right now. But peace plays the long game. It says don't trade a lifetime of calm for a 5-second ego boost. The more you practice choosing peace over ego, the easier it gets. What used to feel like a fight you had to jump into starts to look like a distraction. You can just walk past, and that's when you know you're growing. When things that used to pull you into anger don't even get a rise out of you anymore. So ask yourself, which do you really want to protect, your ego or your peace? Because you can't fully have both. One is about proving yourself, the other is about knowing yourself. And at the end of the day, no argument, no criticism, no little slight is worth giving away the calm you work so hard to build. That's how you start never getting angry again. Let me leave you with this. Anger will always try to show up. It's part of being human, but it doesn't have to run the show. You've seen the tools pause before you react. Name what's really happening. Lower the volume to raise your influence. Shift from attack to curiosity and protect your peace over your ego. Each one of those steps isn't about ignoring anger. It's about mastering it. And when you practice them, you stop being a prisoner to every trigger that comes your way. The real goal isn't to never feel anger again. That's impossible. The goal is to never let anger be the one holding the steering wheel. Because once you know how to pause, how to speak with clarity, how to choose peace over pride, you'll find yourself calmer, stronger, and more in control than you've ever been. So the next time anger knocks, remember you don't have to answer, you get to choose. In that choice, that's the moment